Hello, family, and welcome. We're Bob and Penny Lord. We're high on the highest hill in Rome. Majestically towers the splendid church, Santa Maria in Aracoeli. It was originally called St. Mary's on the Capitol because it was built on the site where once stood the ancient Roman capital, the Capitoline Fortress.
That is until the 12th century, when the name of the church was changed to Aracoeli, or Altar of Heaven. It is on this spot that senators in the ancient Roman Senate would congregate and discuss important issues in the Temple of Jupiter, located next to the Temple of Juno Moneta. It is documented that not only is this so, but in the 13th century, city officials would gather there to discuss affairs of state and determine civic strategies and courses of action, as well as draft up charters to be used to carry out city laws.
No longer a pagan temple, having been built over the ruins of Temple Juno Moneta, Santa Maria in Aracoeli is still looked upon as the church of the Senate and the people of Rome.
Looming high over Christian and pagan Rome, Santa Maria in Aracoeli not only symbolizes, it personifies, it very embodies the victory of Christianity over paganism. It is in keeping with our tradition that this glorious tribute to God would rise from the ruins of a temple to Juno Moneta.
Just as Jesus conquered death and the only true God defeated false gods, our majestic churches have soared from the ruins of pagan temples. Therefore, it is fitting that a church honoring the Queen and Mother should arise from the ashes of a former temple to the pagan goddess Juno Moneta. Interestingly enough, it is popularly believed that the temple Juno Moneta was the original home of the Roman mint. It only stands to reason that this is where we derive the word money, or moneta in Italian.
Now, isn't it interesting that a false goddess name was used to develop a word for monetary exchange? Is the Lord trying to tell us once more, do not worship false idols or gods? When I think of how people's lives are manipulated by the whim of the false goddess money, it brings to mind what Jesus said, "Wherever your treasure lies, there your heart will be." The false goddess of money wins our hearts only to betray us over and over again.
It is self-evident now more than ever that the false goddess of money has betrayed those who have had faith in her. It's time to turn to our Queen and Mother Mary and ask her to reign in our hearts, as she does in the Basilica of Santa Maria in Aracoeli. She, true Mother, will never betray us.
As your eyes travel from this one of Rome's 7 hills to the Rome of yesterday and today, you cannot but marvel at the contrast. Below are the imposing churches still standing after centuries of strife and devastating wars, glorifying God, silently extolling the power of God's everlasting love. And then, in sharp contradiction, are the ruins of what was once proud Rome and the Roman Empire.
The metamorphosis of temple dedicated to a pagan goddess to a church honoring our Blessed Mother was not without foundation. The church has always risen throughout her 2,000 years of walk towards the kingdom, although at times bruised and battered from the onslaughts and the bombardments of the enemy of God. As we meditate on what we see, grand civilization after grand civilization destroyed, and before us our church triumphant, we know Jesus is with us. He has not left us orphans. He will be with us until the end of the world.
Our story goes back to the time of Emperor Augustus. As it unfurls, it appears Emperor Augustus had got wind of a movement in the Senate to proclaim him God. This greatly upset the emperor, and he turned to the Tiburtine Sibyl for a word. Whereupon, after 3 days of fasting, she prophesied the descent from the heavens of the King of the ages. She exclaimed, "I see clear signs in the sky that justice will be done. Soon the earth will be wet with sweat, and from the sky will descend the King of the ages."
As she was imparting her prophetic message, the emperor was doing all he could to try to discern a very clear prediction when he had a vision of the Blessed Mother. Before him stood the Virgin Mary on the altar, radiant, bathed in a flood of blinding light, illuminating her, and the infant Jesus nestled in her arms.
As he stood there mesmerized, he heard a mysterious voice from above. "This is the altar of the Son of God." Upon hearing this, the emperor fell to his knees, prostrating himself on the ground in homage to the heavenly image. He subsequently refused the title of king, which the populace were about to confer upon him. He immediately erected an altar dedicated to the firstborn Son of God and built a church over it, which was eventually enlarged. He called it the Altar of the Heavens, or Aracoeli.
Now, the unusual and miraculous aspect of this account is the fact that Caesar Augustus, emperor of Rome, ruled before the birth of Christ. He was emperor from 27 BC to 14 AD. How amazing is our God to have given an apparition of a lady and the child Jesus to a pagan emperor before she was even born. So this altar of the heavens and the church built over it, which was dedicated to the firstborn Son of God, was all done before Jesus and Mary were born. You can call it amazing, you can call it fantastic. We like to call it divine.
We see documentation of this in Rome's first guidebook from the 12th century. And prior to this, the church had issued an official booklet showing a copy of an 8th century Universal Chronicle relating an even earlier Byzantine historian, Timotheus, from the 5th to the 6th century.
From this alone, it is highly plausible and most likely that a church dedicated to the Virgin existed on the Capitol Hill before the 5th century, called St. Mary's on the Capitol. It was only after the 12th century that it officially became the Aracoeli.
To further affirm this, if you look carefully, you will find on one of the columns in the central nave of the church an inscription which reads, "A Cubiculo Augustorum," or "From the bedroom of Augustus." It would appear it comes from the emperor's palace. There is also an altar in the church which is believed to have been from the time of Emperor Augustus, whose stone tiles retell the legend surrounding the Aracoeli.
Now, at that altar, there's also an urn, which is believed to contain the remains of St. Helena, Constantine's mother. She was responsible for the shrines in the Holy Land and the finding of the true cross. The Aracoeli that began as an altar was to grow into a church. By the year 574, the area could boast a Byzantine monastery run by the Byzantines.
By the 9th century, the Benedictines occupied the church and the monastery and remained in charge right up to the 13th century. In 1249, by virtue of a papal bull issued by Innocent IV, the entire area was turned over to the Franciscan order.
Under the Franciscans, the Church of Santa Maria in Aracoeli was not only restored but enlarged. The huge outdoor staircase leading up to the church that we see till today was built in 1348 by the architect Lorenzo di Simone Andreozzi in thanksgiving to the Blessed Virgin for deliverance of Rome from the Black Plague. I have never counted, but I am told we climbed up 124 steps, which seemed to rise to the heavens.
When we came to Rome and the Church of Santa Maria in Aracoeli, we, with camera equipment, climbed up those steps. As we were putting one foot in front of the other, careful not to look down, our thoughts ran from, why are we going up, to, what if the church is closed? But when we finally entered the church and saw the treasure within, it was well worth it.
This hill represents the two sides of Rome. On one side, there is the magnificent tribute to the baby Jesus and his most precious mother, Santa Maria in Aracoeli, and on the other side, another, less steep staircase leading up to it is the Capitol, or Campidoglio, or City Hall, the seat of the city of Rome's government.
Again, as in all Rome, the spiritual and the secular. Rome is steeped in history, as is the Church of Santa Maria in Aracoeli. Now, there are 3 naves in the church. The floor of the center one is paved with tombstones of renowned persons who made their mark in the history of Rome.
More interesting for our purposes, on a grand 18th century altar is the famous image of the Madonna of Aracoeli. This image was formerly purported to date back to the 11th century, but recent research has placed it further back to the 6th century and the Byzantine monks who lived in Rome and occupied the church at that time.
In 1348, there was a terrible plague threatening Italy, and it was encroaching on Rome. The citizens of Rome took the image of the Madonna of Aracoeli and processed it throughout the streets of Rome, entreating Our Lady to save them from the plague. Needless to say, she came through, and the city was spared. Hence, she earned the honor of sharing the coveted title of Salus Populi Romani with the Madonna in the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore.
In 1636, the image was then crowned by the Vatican with a beautiful golden crown. In 1797, Napoleon and his troops absconded with the crown. But as God will always be ultimately the victor, especially when it comes to his Blessed Mother, in 1938, the image was once again crowned. 10 years later, in 1948, the Roman citizenry chose to be consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary before the image of, you guessed it, the Madonna of Aracoeli. Find the Son, you'll find the Mother, and vice versa. This church, which is so lovingly dedicated to Mother Mary, is equally consecrated to the child Jesus.
Now, although the citizens of Rome have always had a deep devotion to the Madonna of Aracoeli, it is to the child Jesus, the Santo Bambino in the Church of Santa Maria in Aracoeli, that most Romans flock to. As Padre Paolo, a Franciscan superior, stated so lovingly, if you wish to be truly Roman, you must love the Santo Bambino. When you look upon the innocent, rosy, baby cheeks of the little chubby Bambino Gesù, it is difficult to imagine its precarious voyage to its final home in the Church of Santa Maria in Aracoeli.
As to the statue's origin, it was believed sculpted by a Franciscan friar in Jerusalem out of wood from the Garden of Gethsemane in the 15th century. Legend has it that an angel miraculously painted the statue while the Franciscan was sleeping. This was a time when some of the Holy Land was under the custodianship of the Franciscan order.
The Franciscan Curia, headquartered in the Church of Santa Maria in Aracoeli, issued an order that the sacred image be transported from the Holy Land to Rome. The statue began its journey to Europe and Rome when a torrential storm attacked the ship. The ship pitched to and fro. It was tossed so furiously by its raging waves, it caused the statue to fall overboard.
Now again, according to legend, it tells us that the little statue bounced like a little toy riding on the angry waves. Not only did the little Bambino have to brave the winds and the sea, but he had to pass by pirate ships unnoticed, and he did. He bounced by not only pirate ships, but all sorts of mercenaries aboard ships who would have retrieved the little statue for their own devices in a minute if they had spotted the statue. Finally, he landed on the shores of Livorno, right at the feet of the Franciscan friar who had been fearfully awaiting the Bambino's arrival.
Once home, in his chapel in the Church of Santa Maria in Aracoeli, the Bambino got to work. The little Bambino brought about numerous unexplainable miracles. His visits to hospitals were made in a jewel-studded gilded carriage donated by the people of Rome. The statue till today is being carried to the beds of those seriously ill and those dying.
Like the Bambino whom he represents, whenever there has been a disaster, whether an earthquake or flood or any other kind of catastrophe, Santo Bambino has always been available to those who turn to him. On such occasions, the jewels from the Bambino statue have always historically been sold to help victims.
Like his Franciscan friar friends, the statue of the little Bambino spends his lunch hour, more like 3 to 4 hours, in the monastery. When the friars close the church at noon, they wrap the statue of Santo Bambino and carry him lovingly to their quarters. News of the statue of our little Bambino and the miracles received by placing petitions before the statue for him to bring to the Bambino in heaven could not be contained in Rome. His fame has reached beyond even the shores of Italy and then Europe, and now here in the United States, causing floods of letters to arrive from the 4 corners of the world. Petitions
are more often than not followed by letters of thanksgiving, whereupon they are placed on both sides of the altar until such time as they are burned unopened. Each year on Christmas Eve, the outdoor 124 steps leading up to the church of Santa Maria in Aracoeli are lit on both sides by candles, inviting the citizens of Rome to come and worship the baby Jesus. Musicians congregate outside the front of the church, serenading mother and child within with traditional Christmas music.
The flickering light from the chandeliers and candles within stream through the stained glass windows, beckoning the faithful of Rome. At midnight, the statue of the child Jesus is processed from his private chapel adjacent to the sacristy to a Baroque throne used for special feast days and processions, which has been placed before the main altar to there preside during the midnight mass. When the congregation begins to sing the Gloria, a veil which has been covering the statue is removed, and the statue of the little Bambino is processed ceremoniously from before the high altar to a nativity creche awaiting it on the side altar to the left.
From Christmas to the Feast of the Epiphany, the statue of the Santo Bambino rests in a special chapel near the front of the church. In that way, the little King of the world can joyously behold God's children of all ages coming to pay homage to the newborn King, just as the shepherds and 3 wise men did before them. An endless parade of children come to celebrate the Christmas season in this fashion. They kneel before the image of the infant Jesus, sometimes leaving little gifts. They pray to the baby Jesus, petitioning him for favors that not yet received, and thanking him for the gifts they have received. In return, they sing little hymns or recite poems they have studied just for this occasion.
It is such a joy to see parents and grandparents prompting their little ones, pointing to the child Jesus in his crib, recounting the story of his birth, or just leading them in prayers, reliving the traditions of their ancestors, keeping Jesus alive in the hearts of their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
On the Feast of the Epiphany, the statue is taken from the place of honor it occupied and is processed with much pomp and ceremony across the front of the church towards the top of the steep 124 steps leading up to the church of the Aracoeli, where he will participate in the benediction of the city of Rome and her inhabitants. The statue will remain there for all the citizens of Rome to give the child Jesus an epiphany kiss, which has been their tradition for centuries.
When the day is over and the sun goes down, the little Bambino is processed to his chapel, where he will reside, receiving the faithful year-round, until Christmas Eve comes around again, as it will, most definitely. And then he will be available for the Romans and pilgrims to come, venerate, and do homage to the little Bambino Gesù.
The more we travel and the more we research, the more we discover it would take 1,000 lifetimes to tell the whole story of our glorious, often wounded but always victorious Mother Church. What is there about the Santo Bambino that draws young and old? Is it that we're hungering for the faith that we had when we were children? And the little Bambino is a sign in our midst that all we had learned on the knees of our mothers and grandmothers was still true and is still available.
On Christmas Day, right up to the Feast of the Epiphany, when you attend Holy Mass, don't just bring up the little children. Bring up the little child in you to adore our little Savior, our little King, who was born to die for our sins.
Family, thank you for being with us here and adoring the Bambino Gesù of Santa Maria Aracoeli in Rome.
If the Lord wills that you should come with us on pilgrimage to Rome, be assured that we will spend time with the infant Jesus, the Santo Bambino, way up high, close to heaven.
We love you. God bless you.